Japan is a fascinating sort of test case. There's a fund manager I met around 2000, and I like to squirrel away cheesy quotes so I can use them like a squirrel and bury them and then bring them back later for use. And he said something that's always stuck with me, which is, he was a Japanese equity manager, and I said, this is around the turn of the millennium, and he said, Japan had been the dress rehearsal, the rest of the world would be the main event. And those words have haunted me ever since. And Japan is really misunderstood because people, as I say, treat Japan like a basket case. Now, it's absolutely true that the Japanese government is beyond bankrupt. It is completely unsalvageable. So they were the first into this debt deflation mess, this debt deflation trap, 30 years ago. But the perversity of it was that I was working for the Japanese in London. And when at the start of my career, if memory serves, Japanese government bond, JGB yields was something like maybe 6%. And you'd think with the explosive issuance in Japanese debt as their economy imploded after the equity market and the property market collapsed, you would think that Japanese yields might have gone higher because they had to issue so many of them. That's not the case. So shorting Japanese paper became the widowmaker, so-called widowmaker trade. So Japanese government bonds yielded, their yield went from 6% to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And I think they actually troughed at something like minus 0.5%. They went negative. And you'd think this is during a period when the government is building up extraordinary liabilities. It didn't really make any economic sense. Anyhow, like I say, the Japanese experience was so interesting to see firsthand. And Japan remains, I think, the most misunderstood market in the world. The perversity of it is the Japanese government is bankrupt. The Japanese state is completely bankrupt. They've got one of the worst debt to GDP ratios in the world. But, and here's the big but coming, the Japanese country, Japanese households and corporations are amongst the most solvent in the world. So you've got this complete mismatch between the health of the private sector and the diseased state of the public sector. And again, I stress that it's been misunderstood, but it's so relevant given where we are now in the global interest rate and the economic cycle. The Japanese loss of wealth from 89, their equity market collapsed and their property market collapsed. The twin loss of value between equity valuations and property valuations was the equivalent of 2 American Great Depressions. So it's like they experienced the 1930s once and then experienced it all over again. Now, that is an extraordinary state of affairs. And the reason I highlight that is because if you could imagine that loss of wealth occurring in a Western economy in America, say an Anglo-Saxon economy like America or the UK, or probably anywhere in Europe, there'd be riots on the streets. But in their defense, say one thing about the Japanese, they are stoic. They have a capacity to suffer, which is beyond, I think, anything the West is capable of. So whereas Japan could survive that, and now the Japanese equity market has largely recovered, where it'll go in the future, time will tell, but we think the Japanese market remains relatively cheap internationally. But I simply highlight the fact that Japan had this extraordinary, unique experience. And if my fund manager friend from 2000 is correct, they were the dress rehearsal. The rest of the world is going in maybe the same direction.